Hello and welcome to Daily Politics on Trust TV. On this program, we discuss issues around politics, policy, and governance. I am Shafiu Suleiman. The unbundling of Nigeria's power sector by the Goodluck Jonathan administration in 2010 saw the sector split into three or four main branches: generation, transmission, distribution, and of course, the regulatory aspect, talking about the NERC. Now, since the unbundling of the sector, Nigeria's government has retained, the transmission aspect of it, with the National Electricity Regulatory Commission regulating the industry. The essence of this unbundling was to guarantee effective generation, transmission, and distribution of electricity to the end user. But despite the strategic importance of this energy to the development of the economy, Nigeria still grapples with low distribution and constant grid collapse. Now we ask, are Nigerians getting value of the unbundling of the power sector? Or is it only a change in name, but the players remain the same? What are the impediments denying Nigerians of stable electricity supply, despite the government sinking trillions of dollars to intervene in the sector? These and many more questions will form the basis of our today's conversation as we beam our searchlight on Nigeria's power sector. We have in the studio a ranking member of the Ministry of Power, talking about the Director of Investment, Engineer Farouk Yabo, who will be giving us his perspectives on the issue. Welcome to the program.
Thank you very much, Malan Shafiu.
Now, we will now take a quick break. When we return, the conversation will begin. Stay with us. Thank you very much for staying with us. It's still Daily Politics, and today our talking point is addressing Nigeria's power sector, challenges in Nigeria's power sector. And just like I said earlier, we have in the studio Engineer Farouk Yabo, who is the Director Investment and also Sector Development in the Ministry of Power. He's also one of the newly appointed, permanent secretaries. He is here with us to share his thoughts. Once again, welcome to the program.
Thank you very much again, Malan Shafiu.
Right. Okay. Just like it was captured in the introduction. Before the unbundling of the power sector, Nigeria has been, realizing energy, especially power, has been elusive, despite investment to the tune of around $2 billion annually. Now that we have the sector unbundled, Nigerians have had a lot of expectations on the power sector, especially your ministry is central to delivering this power to the end users. In summary, how would you describe the change in name, some will say, from the power holding company to, the now having electricity distribution companies, generation companies, and the transmission company of Nigeria?
Okay, thank you very much, Malan Shafiu. I think it's not just in name. Okay. You see, before 2005, right, the power industry has been what we call an integrated monopoly, simply meaning that the generation, transmission, and distribution are in one single entity and it's also highly monopolized in the sense that it's owned by the same entity, which is the government. And before then, the main legal instrument that is running the power sector has been the Eastwhile Cap 106. Okay. And then also Eastwhile Cap 258, which is the Nigerian National Electric Power Authority Act, and National Electricity Supply and National Electricity Installation Regulation. Now, those acts restrict anybody from coming to play in the power sector. And so, unfortunately, it also became very clear over the years from the 80s up to the late 90s around the world that for any country to succeed in expanding its power sector in a sustainable long-term way, you need to allow the private sector to come in. And so that gave birth to the National Electric Power Policy of 2001, which gave the framework under which the sector will be open for anybody to legally put money in, because clearly government can't do it alone. So that was a major achievement when Nigeria happens to pass the law. And from 2005, when the law was passed by the National Assembly in a joint session of Senate and House, in a very phenomenal way, because this is something that many countries have tried to do, but they could not do it because of the intricacies involved, particularly the labor union issues. So, but having passed the law, it took us up to 2013, precisely 1st of November 2013, to actually be able to sell out or to allow for private sector to come. And there was a lot of hopes, a lot of enthusiasm from all over the world. In fact, I remember South Africans were saying, if Nigeria can do it, we also can do it. At so many meetings.
So like a pace setter. So
yeah, it's a pace setter for the continent, because obviously nobody has done it, and people see it as a major thing. Of course, it was promoted by our development partners like the World Bank and other partners who feels that this is the way to go.
Right. Okay. Let's look at the beginning. Shortly after the takeover, there have been concerns around the investors we are talking about, those who came in actually.
Yes.
Looking at the rot, the deficiency or the deficit in terms of infrastructure, in terms of our ability to generate and distribute efficiently. Some expect the investors coming in will come in with a lot of funding to revive or
that's
to enhance.
Actually where I'm going.
That's right.
Yeah, because the government was so magnanimous to take such a decision. In fact, the entire sector was sold for around $3 billion. And over half of that was used to settle labor issues alone, to allow for the entry of private people, because the labor was resisting that. So the whole idea was to have a very transparent process where the most competent, most efficient, both from a technical perspective and from an investment perspective, will take ownership of these assets and develop them, and particularly reduce what we call the ATC and C losses, which is to rehabilitate the lines, to ensure there is effective metering, and to improve the revenue coming into the market. That was the basis upon which the companies were sold out to these private people. Unfortunately, somewhere along the line, well, depending on who you speak to, many people believe that the companies were sold out to the wrong team, who probably did not know or did not estimate the level of work, the level of investment that needs to happen. A lot of them probably do not see the bigger picture. So, and here we are with a sector fully privatized from the generation side, which means government has limited role or even control. So government hands are tight, And here we are also with the distribution side, which is also 60% sold out to the private sector, with the management under the contracts being assigned to the private sector. So also government hands are tight, and then the government was left with the transmission. Right. Now, the expectation was that immediately this was done, this investment will come massively, and then these losses will continue to be reduced so that the system can become cheaper. The cost of kilowatt hour should be going cheaper as you reduce the losses, because the losses entails money you can't collect from customers because of theft of electricity, because of losses along the line, because of non-collection.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah, sufficiently you talked about, because that has been the fundamental, if you like, challenge right from day one. Yes. The people who took over. You also talked about their expectations. Perhaps they are eager to go into the deal without necessarily looking at their own part of the bargain, their own obligations. Yes. And shortly after, we begin to hear about lamentations that they've taken over, facilities that are decayed, facilities that are inactive, facilities that requires, replacement, and there is no corresponding funds to do that. Now, what happened thereafter? Because you happen to be a critical stakeholder. What was the reaction from government? How is government looking at this? Because certainly it will affect the expectations, of Nigerians.
Yes, so that's the other side. I've just spoken about what is being viewed, the private sector side. But on the other hand, the private sector tends to believe or tends to argue that yes, they have not got into the details, but it's not their fault. But I think that is a discounted argument, if one should be honest, because the whole idea of this kind of transition is people believe the private sector is more efficient in terms of management. People believe the private sector is more accessible to financing. But we found ourselves in a situation where the private sector that are at the helm of affairs could not do the basic things that would have allowed for. Of course, there was this issue of tariffs that were not cost reflective and so on. But
even that was addressed later. Anyway,
yeah, it was addressed. Yeah, that's what I wanted to go. Government, to be fair, has been extremely generous in terms of always trying to be sometimes a bit late, but always trying to make sure that those issues that are raised are addressed. So far, I mean, hundreds of billions of naira, and in many instances, even you can say trillions, have been spent by government in trying to make it comfortable, make the environment clear for the private sector.
At some point, there was, I think, there was this intervention by the federal government talking about, I can't remember the figures now, but yes, there was a substantial amount of intervention, which was provided by the government to enable them, remain afloat.
Yes.
Yes.
So that's just what I was trying to point out. The government has done quite a lot from the first intervention of 213 billion
that's right.
to the second 701 billion naira to another 600 billion, and so on and so forth. And even as we speak, there's a lot of things. But don't forget, these are interventions that government view as extremely necessary, because the alternative would have been for the sector to actually stand still. So, but the point I think we should really focus on is where the problems are.
Yeah, we'll be talking about the problems. But then, let's look at what changed,
Yes.
from then and now. In terms of investment, you talked about what the government has been doing,
yes,
and perhaps the private sector, they also must have also in a way, come up with some solutions to the problem. What has changed in terms of the infrastructure that we are talking about? Has there been any facelift? What has been invested in terms of improving the capacity now?
Yes, I think a major thing that has happened very recently under the current leadership of the Honorable Minister Aliu is insisting in ensuring the effectiveness of contract. Don't forget, this is a regulated market where you sign contracts. I'm going to supply you so megawatt from as a generator. Transmission, you are going to take it up to the distributor at so price, at so time, by so conditions. All these contracts or agreements were signed between the players. Unfortunately, in a typical setting of public administration setting, these contracts were not enforced until 1st of July this year, when it became very clear that we can no longer continue to assign responsibility with no sanctions when people fail.
Yeah, what constituted the delay in terms of enforcement?
Yeah, this idea.
Would it be the bureaucratic bottleneck, or what exactly was the reason behind the delay?
Well, to be honest, a lot of this has to do with this do your own before I do my own kind of tendency, where the distribution man will say, well, the tariffs are not high, so you cannot hold me on to pay the invoices you have sent. And then the generator would say, look, the agreement I have with MBET is not, is on base of endeavor kind of, it's not concretized. So it's really you can't just pinpoint one single person. Of course, the regulators are at the helm of affairs, so you expect the regulators to take such a decision, which is what they've just done with the support of the policymakers. Because many times, a key problem we have over the years has been that of coordination.
Okay.
When you don't coordinate the public sector players, and then you have the private sector players, despite their divergence, but working as a team.
Does the NERC mandate covers the coordination or just regulation?
Yeah, absolutely regulation. Their mandates do a lot to do with regulation, but then regulations also is part of the coordination, because for you to be able to ask people to do a particular thing, you have to use the regulator. So therefore, that aspect of regulation, coordination, is also one of the key things that is has evolved largely, because as we speak, the current leadership in the ministries, meets every 2 weeks with all the sector players within the public side, that is the regulator, the bulk trading company, the transmission operators, the rural education agency, name it. Everybody comes to the Ministry of Power every 2 weeks, and then the minister chairs a meeting where all the issues
are
tabled out and discussed, and then a united front is presented, so that the government will now also be speaking with one voice, as against the discordant in the much past, yes.
Okay, now looking at, because to a layman, what Nigerians are hearing in most cases is that there seems to be much of the problem has to do with distribution. Generation has been substantial. There's substantial growth in terms of generation. Before now, we're talking about 4,000 thereabout megawatts. At some point, it got to 6,000, 7,000 megawatts in terms of generation, isn't it? But the major challenge we get to know has to do with distribution. Is it that the infrastructure to deliver, if you like, or evacuate this power that is generated that is lacking, or what exactly is the problem along the line of distribution?
Okay, so the main, if I put it this way, we have had interface issues.
Okay.
That is, the interface between generation and transmission is not properly aligned. Sometimes where you have capacity to generate power, the transmission corridors may not be able to take all the power at the same time. So you have to do what is more or less some kind of shifting or shading of the generators. The same thing from the transmission distribution interface. Sometimes you have a transmission transformer that has a lot of capacity, but the distribution company is not able to pick those loads, or they are not willing to take it because they are not able to meter the customers around those spaces. So it all boils down to investment and what government is doing to address it. You are aware of the EPI program, that is the Presidential Power Initiative, which has been on the pipeline for quite some time and has just taken up. If you are on the news recently, you would have seen that the Honorable Minister of Power has unveiled the deliveries of the first 2 Mobitra transformers, which are coming this September, and subsequently another tranche of 5 shift will come with 2 transformers to bring 10. Okay. And the mobile substation are also coming. Now, these equipments are coming to address these interface challenges, planning to expand the capacity end-to-end to 7,000 megawatts. And then to 11,000 megawatt and 25,000 megawatts. So all of this
longer term.
In the longer term, not so long term, because these things, I mean, as we speak today, the suppressed load we have by system operations reporting is in the range of close to 30,000 megawatts that is needed. So you find that most of the load that is suppressed is being supplied by generators, be they big-time generators or small generators. So the opportunities to expand generation is absolutely there. Of course, the transmission infrastructure is the government's on which the government is now working on this. Beyond the expansion and rehabilitation, new lines, which has been stranded for many years, on the account of right-of-way, because that's a major challenge in this country, where government commits funds, award contracts, money is ready, contractors are on site with all the equipment to install. But some communities along the route of the line will insist that they will be given double the amount of the entire contract for them to allow the line to pass through. And that has constrained the grid for so many years. We have so many of these things all across the country, which the minister is actually personally taking on, together with the Minister of State and the FAMSEC, going place by place to ensure the state governments in particular are helping in a phenomenal way. For instance, the Kano state government has been very kind enough lately to even contribute in terms of payment of some of these things. I think other states in the south also are doing the same. Right.
Okay, you talked about something fundamental, and it has been of concern to many Nigerians, the fact that the electricity generated in most cases, remain redundant, so to speak, because the distributors, one, do not have the capacity to absorb, if you like, and then distribute. Another aspect is that they're also looking at return on investment. You talk about the ability to meter the metering public effectively for them to have returns on their investment. This has also been a serious concern. So what happened, in the event that we have enough power generated, but it is not yet utilized because of this challenge? What happened, along the line in terms of?
Well, I think that's where the challenge has been. As we speak, we know the capacity, installed capacity is about 13,000 megawatts. Out of it, about 7,500 is available. But the highest peak we've ever seen, which was about last year in May, is about 5,800 megawatt alone, and that is also just the peak. So the question is, we must invest. The people that took over these assets, the investors in this distribution company, must invest and must be held to account, which is exactly what the government is doing. If you follow the news, you would have seen that the banks that borrowed funds to some of these distribution companies have started taking over this distribution, and that's where we are going to get to. Now, what that does is it allows for reinvestment or capitalization of these distribution companies. Because as it is now, if I bought an asset and it's mine, and I don't have money to invest in it, but it's mine, so I will hold everybody to ransom. But if somebody that maybe borrowed me money
the facility,
can now expand it to say, look, anybody who has money, let's expand the capital base so that we have the money
to break the monopoly,
to buy more transformers, to buy more meters, to rehabilitate the lines, and everybody have lives. So what has been happening over the years is some people own this asset and it's their own, it's in their pocket, nobody can do anything with it. But what government is doing with the full support of the leadership of the country, because this need political will.
Yes, sir.
No minister or no chairman of the regulator can do it alone. You need powerful politicians to understand the issues and to make sure that this is, Nigeria is helped to get out of this. Otherwise, there is no way we can move forward with little amount of money that these people have, and so we'll continue to be there. But once you open it, people will we can even quote these companies. They can go into the stock markets and get money so that people can now see the light. And don't forget, the power industry is one of the most lucrative. And the whole idea of opening it to private sector is for it to be a kind of a bankable system where people can invest and recoup their money like it's done elsewhere.
Yeah, to add value to the economy.
Exactly.
Now, and then looking at, talking about these challenges, how do they contribute to the frequent grid collapse that we're seeing? Some say there is some nexus between what is happening, the challenge that is emanating or that is prevailing, among these two key components, the distribution and the generation and the distribution, and of course the frequent grid collapse that we're seeing. How does it connect?
Well, I don't want to use the word grid collapse because obviously it's been repeated and many times people misunderstand it. You see, the biggest challenge of power industry anywhere in the world is the ability to manage the demand and supply. Right. At every millisecond or less, the power you generate must be equal to the power you supply, you use, or you will have this imbalance. And depending on where the imbalance is coming, if it's coming from the, what you call demand side, which is the customer side, you call it kind of, disturbances, right? Somebody takes more power and you don't have enough from the generation side. And that's why we have what is called the frequency, which is in the case of Nigeria at 50 Hz, it can highest go 49.72, or on the other side it can go 50.25. So at any point it goes beyond that, you are likely going to have some generators shutting down because it's like protecting themselves, which is what we call from the other side a response. So the generators response when they realize that is going to be some kind of impact. So, but in situation where you are running a sector where the demand is so much more than the supply, it makes it difficult for even the regulators to allow what we call spinning reserve. The spinning reserve is that quantity of power that is supposed to be kept just waiting in case the generator, the demand goes high at a very short notice. You now release this generation, but then you need to pay for somebody keeping his generator. So what is happening in our system is that those capacities that are supposed to be waiting in case of this imbalance from the demand side have to be all put in because there is so much demand. That's right. So once you have this high pool, immediately the generators will realize that, look, we're in trouble, so they will just shut down.
So when they shut down, to a layman, there is collapse in the
there is collapse. But truly, it's in the normal power system, each minute by minute, there is this kind of changes. But the ability of other systems to have what they can do to recover in milliseconds that you won't see any change, we don't have. We have already used everything. So when they shut down, when the pooling is too much, you now have to start. And one of the biggest challenge we have is not even the pooling, because most of these generators have become so, professional in terms of managing this kind of imbalance because of our very difficult situation. But the big challenge we have is when somebody blew up a tower.
You mean talking about activities of vandals?
Yeah, vandals. When somebody do it deliberately to do it, there is no generator that can stop the system from getting out for hours.
This is a big challenge. Perhaps when we return, we'll take it up from there. In case you're just joining us, the program is Daily Politics, and today we're looking at addressing the challenges in Nigeria's power sector with Engineer Farouk Yabo. He happens to be the Director, Investment and Sector Development of the Federal Ministry of Power. He's also one of the newly appointed permanent secretaries. Together, we'll be looking at the issues in the sector. We'll take a break. When we return, we'll continue with the discussion. Stay with us. Thank you very much for staying with us on Daily Politics. And today, our talking point is addressing Nigeria's electricity challenges, or Nigeria's power sector. And we have in the studio Engineer Farouk Yabo, who is the Director Investment and Sector Development in the Ministry of Power. Just before the break, we're looking at some of the impediments. And you raised this very disturbing issue of beyond, the systemic issue, we also have human-related issues, talking about the activities of vandals. How much of this challenge, has affected the delivery of this sector, looking at the magnitude of some of these attacks?
Well, a lot, because you may be aware that the Maiduguri, the capital of Borno State, has been without electricity for quite some time. And this is because of the activities of these bundles, who happens to take time, plan, prepare, and blow out up to 11 towers. I mean, you pick this, with army, with military, and then they go to the next one like that.
They ensure that
so it gets to a level where it's becoming uneconomical, and it doesn't make sense to continue to do this. Rather, we look for alternatives, and which could be the distributed generators, which currently is being deployed to serve places like Maiduguri.
That's right.
It's also a very common thing with the gas pipelines. You will be aware that in recent times, one of the key challenges has also been gas. And this has two-pronged problems. One is deliberate vandalizations of the pipelines. And the second is the issue of prioritization of gas supply to other sectors than the power sector, because the power sector's gas pricing mechanism has been pegged into certain amount of pricing, which is what is tied down to the MITO, that is multi-year tariff order framework. So whenever there is any shortage in supply, the first victim is the power sector. So when all of these are accumulated together from the gas side, you also find the people operating the power sector are at the receiving end, because this is you working in the power sector with no control whatsoever outside of the effectiveness of the contracts you have from the gas side. So
especially those operating the thermal power plants.
Exactly, and which is more than 80% of our capacity, installed capacity today is thermal power plants. So it's something that we really need coordination. And like I've said, the key thing that is being done by the power sector to address this issue is the activation of this contract, because for any generator to get gas, he has to have a valid functional contract with the gas supplier, and he will have to have a gas supply agreement as well. So currently, under the leadership of the Honorable Minister of Power, we were able to get all the stakeholders, all the market participants to agree to this particular understanding that the contractual agreements between the parties have to be effective, and therefore everybody is held on to account on the basis of what he has signed.
Right. Talking about accountability, yes. Let's look at the mix, so to speak. You know, Nigeria has been. I mean, you talked about largely the fact that Nigeria generates power from the thermal, largely, and of course, there is need, some would say, for Nigeria to diversify, the energy sources away from thermal, alone. There is opportunity in the solar sector. There is also opportunity utilizing the wind and other sources. At some point, I understand there was a plant that was being built in Katsina that is wind, powered. Another one is in Kaduna. That's the one that is expected to power the Kudandan industrial area. Talking about, it's a 215 megawatts or so.
Yes.
How much of this diversification are we witnessing, in order to add value to what is happening in the industry?
Well, a lot, because you see, the need for renewable is driven by two things. One, the ongoing discussions around the climate crisis. Secondly, the issue of availability and use of secured resources like solar, hydro, and wind. Thirdly, also the opportunities for new job creations and for decentralization. So, looking at all of this, Nigeria, under the current administrative leadership, has been able to develop the relevant policy frameworks. For instance, we have the Electricity Vision 30-30-30, which is a vision to have 30,000 megawatts of generating capacity on grid by the year 2030, with at least 30% of that coming from renewable energy. And renewable energy here speaks to solar, hydro, wind, some biomass, and even geothermal in specific parts of the country.
That's right.
Now, because the grid also needs to be more stabilized for you to inject intermittent capacity, because usually intermittency is from the demand side. Now, if you have a very strong grid, you can actually accommodate intermittency from the supply side. Because, of course, solar is not going to be all day round. It's going to have levels.
The season,
Exactly. So, but
seasonal.
It's going to be seasonal, or at least in the day you have solar, in the night you don't have solar. So that has limited the ability of large-scale integration of renewable energy, because it comes with risk. And what government expects is the private sector should have the appetite to take some of this risk of integrating renewable energy into the mix. But they have been a bit skeptical, wanting the government to take the full pledge of the risk in terms of PPA risk and even PCOA risk and offtake risk, which I think government is not comfortable doing because of the fact that the private sector owns the distribution networks, and therefore government may not necessarily be in a position to control those risks. You can't take a risk that you are not fully
in charge of. That's right.
But I'm happy to say that in recent times, through the engagement of the Federal Ministry of Finance, the Honorable Minister of Finance, and the Power, the government has been able to convince these developers to actually see reason. And at the last count, I think about 2-3 weeks back, a meeting was held and agreement was reached with all the stakeholders, particularly the 14 solar PPAs who had signed the PPAs since 2016.
Right. Okay.
To take this challenge from their side.
Right. Talking about freeing the national grid, if you like, or decentralizing or reducing the burden, there are a lot of suggestions around the need to decentralize the grid to allow states perhaps to take some part of it. States should be able to come up with their, state grids, even local government grids, some say. That way, the burden will be taken off the national grid, which is, enormous. As, experts in the industry, how much of this do you think would help address the problem that we're facing today?
Well, certainly grid decentralization is a well-known phenomenon across the world. People are doing it. The ability for maybe local governments or even states to take the national grid itself is something that I think needs people to think through thoroughly. What I think is better done is what is popularly known as distributed generation and even independent electricity distribution networks. Regionalization and full independent management is possible, but I think in terms of the ownership and control, the National Control Center ought to continue to be centralized, because there is a lot of security issues around that, especially at our stage of development. We could get to a level in the near future where the full disaggregation of the grid and even its ownership could be done. But I think for efficiency and for control and security, it's always better to have one single system operator that is going to be able to manage the entire grid. Of course, if anybody wants to invest in the transmission grid, even as we speak in the Ministry of Power, we have a framework which is being undergoing approvals, where both the states, the local government, the private operators, anybody who wants to invest to support the grid will do that. But in terms of the control, I think our system is quite too young to be able to get so disaggregated at this particular time.
Right. You were earlier talking about the level of transparency and accountability that comes with the unbundling and perhaps the regulatory framework that is embedded in it. Before now, the power sector is one that is seen to have been involved in monumental aspects of corruption and what have you. Even those along the value chain, so to speak, or those providing the services are said to be shortchanging Nigerians. Again, with the multi-year tariff order, which has sort of tried to balance the equation now, create what do you call cost-effective, right, pricing of the electricity. Nigerians are, in most cases, are concerned about the impact they get. They pay high, but they get less in terms of supply. This has generated a lot of issues around between the industry and, of course, the consumers. What is happening? How is this happening? In spite of this effort to ensure efficiency.
I think I will agree with you that until this point, the transparency in the industry has not reached the level that we should be talking about.
Right.
I really see no reason why we will still have problems with knowing what money is collected and who takes what, because it only takes the use of modern technology. I don't see any reason today why we should be using the conventional meters of electricity. We should be able to today use meters that are GPS identified from anywhere, and that can be switched up and on from wherever you are, and that every Nigerian actually should be able to go somewhere online and see what is happening. There is no reason why we should not do that. The good news is that the current leadership have obviously seen reason to digitalize the sector. As we speak, there are a few pilot projects that are going on, but promoted by the ministry and by the regulator, where there will be a standardized central data management system. In the case of the ministry, for instance, we have in the last few years try to map the entire country to define where people are living first, and then also map the entire distribution networks at 33 and 11 kb feeder. So today, if you go to the website nigeriac4all.gov.ng, which is developed by the ministry in collaboration with some of our developing partners, particularly with the funding from EU and the German government and the Ministry of Power, you will now be able to see that all the communities that are in this country that are connected to the grid, you can see them. And going deeper, you can also see which household has what kind of system in certain pilots within that network. So the whole idea is we must be able to know who is taking power, where is he, what infrastructure is there, what is not there, what needs to happen, and this should be done on your phone, on your handset. People should be able to see all of this.
Right.
And the main thing that is happening now is there is that drive. In fact, the regulator has recently commit to approving the IoT meter code. Before now, you can't deploy such technologies in the industry because there is no codes for them.
Right.
There is no regulatory frameworks.
Right. Okay, talking about the metering, which is very, very crucial, the responsibility, I understand, has to do with the distribution companies, right? But substantial number of Nigerians. And how is this done? Does it come with a cost? Because some are meant to pay for these meters and what have you. Is it free? Is the Nigerian government, the power authorities, how is it done?
It's really unfortunate when you hear the story, people are still paying for meters because ordinarily the meter cost is supposed to be shouldered by the distribution company, and not just the distribution company, they pass it through to the customer because it's captured in the tariffs.
Okay.
Now, because of this unwillingness or incapacity of the distribution companies to actually invest, it becomes difficult, and that's why now government use so many interventions. Example, the National Mass Metering Program, which has already disbursed close to 50 billion naira to some of the stakeholders that are supposed to deploy these meters. So
but it is still being sold actually, because you hardly
really
get it free.
Because the regulator has open website. I know they have so many complaint channels where if you have meters, of course there are ways through which you can buy meter if you want to buy. And then it will be amortized through your tariffs. The regulation is there.
Do Nigerians know about these processes? And
I believe many may not know, but there is a framework that is done by the regulator where, because of the urgent need and the limited rollout of these meters, that if you insist that you want and your turn hasn't reached, you want to pay for it, you can still be accommodated, but the regulator must pay you back in terms of your maybe tariffs, reduction or credit over time. But the real position is meters are ordinarily supposed to be deployed by the distribution companies. Now the distribution company have been seen by government to be incapable of doing it at the rate that is needed, and government has deployed and that's what we are saying. We now need to make sure these meters are actually the right meters we are deploying.
Right. Okay. Before we go, fundamentally, Nigerians have had a lot of expectations on this government, especially with regards to the Mambila Hydro project, power project. It has generated a lot of back and forth and concerns among Nigerians. At some point, the minister, did say that there was nothing happening there. Later, there were also efforts to. At what stage are we now with regards to this very important project?
Okay, as you know, in I think January or February 2020, just before the COVID came in, I was appointed to be the chairman of the Mambila Hydropower, technical committee.
Right.
And we have done an extensive work. We have gotten to a level where we believe that it's just a matter of getting the government tap, and then we can deliver on Mambila. Of course, the core issue we had was this of litigation. There is a gentleman who has a company who claims to own the contract, of course, that is a different topic to be discussed.
Right. So we're still at that stage of disposing
there is movement, because so far a value engineering has been done based on what we have submitted to the leadership of the country. It was subjected to another review. NSIA did that, and they have validated what we've said. And right now, as we speak, the idea is looking for alternative sources of fund, because the main funding is coming from the Chinese, and the Chinese are saying they can provide the funds until we resolve that issue. So we're looking at alternative sources of funding that project, and we're at very past stage, but this is something that I wouldn't want to discuss into details here.
Right, okay, we hope we'll get you some other time to talk about, because this is very, very important project that Nigerians are actually looking forward to see, come to fruition, especially under this administration. Thank you very much, Engineer Farouk Yabo, for talking to us on daily politics. We really appreciate your thoughts and perspectives on the platform. So on behalf of Engineer Farouk Yabo, who happens to be the Director, Investment and Sector Development of the Power Ministry, also one of the newly appointed permanent secretaries. At some point, he was also, Director in the renewable energy sector. Thank you very much once again. On his behalf and the technical crew, this is where we end this conversation on addressing Nigeria's power challenges. On behalf of the technical crew, my name is Shafiu Suleiman. Have a wonderful day ahead.